Two vastly different MMOs dropped some news over the last couple days, and I wanted to talk about both of them. Oh yeah, and because I'm slow with editing, we have news on Pantheon Rise of the Fallen too, with a big content drop just around the corner, like actually in like a couple days, and more news on what's coming, what's ahead of schedule, and what's behind schedule. So I guess that's actually, well, 3 games instead of 2. One is the rebirth of a cult classic that is truly a beautiful MMO that's bringing in action combat and all new gameplay, even potentially freaking PvP invasions. The other one is a classically inspired rebirth of the genre, an EverQuest-like that is aiming for early access in 2026. And they're kind of making me look like a bit like an idiot for saying that I had wished there was more testing, because there's gonna be a shit ton more testing. It's like, oops, all testing. Let's go eat some crow and talk about these two vastly different MMOs. We'll start with Aion 2 and the live stream that revealed the new goals of the game after it was initially announced back in 2018 as a mobile game, and it's now shifted to PC first. Because, well, NCSoft's entire mobile division kind of collapsed kind of recently, so it makes a lot of sense. It's a game that's looking to capture the original vision of Aion despite the game being a sequel, trying to push the game to where they wanted it back in 2008, but were confined by the limitations of technology at the time. The gameplay trailer they showed off just a few days ago showcased some absolutely stunning visuals, especially the setting itself. Just, you know, be a little careful if you get like motion sickness or anything like that, or when you look at the scene with all the different ways that you can travel in Aion 2. Traversal mechanics like gigantic wings that unfurl to lions to swimming to freaking dragons. The game definitely looks like it's going to be heavy on the flash with incredible animations and visual effects. It also looks like they're going for action combat, as we've seen some clear dodging about in the combat sections, putting this kind of in the direct competition against another MMO that we just got news about that might launch next year alongside Aion 2, Chrono Odyssey. It just, for lack of a better word, looks epic, almost like what you'd expect from a single-player RPG. But we learned a bit more about the game and how it will play from their live stream as well. But before we get into the details, I've got to poop all over your party. I should have just said party pooper. But regardless, I'm here to poop on it, because NCSoft has already said the game's global release is delayed to 2026. Though it is on track for a regional release in Taiwan and South Korea in the second half of 2025, with testing beginning later this month of June. Oh yeah, and the other thing, it will possibly have light pay to win, maybe light pay to win that maybe gets worse over time, reading into their comments. Really, whatever they meant by this statement, which admittedly is translated, so sometimes things get lost in translation, but specifically, quote, "It is impossible to include a BM, business model, like Lineage-like from the beginning. Of course, it is not that there are no pay-to-win elements at all, but since it is targeting the global market, it is not a game like Lineage-like game that is usually thought of. So I guess like light pay-to-win with perhaps more aggressive later on, because they talked about it in the beginning, and then oh, that makes me sad. But for all we know, what they're talking about could be cosmetics, it could be services like, I don't know, name changes, could be experience potions, it could be starter gear or mounts, or it could be something even worse. I have no idea, and I've given up on trying to predict monetization MMOs, because even when a game says it won't be pay to win, this stuff often sneaks in. So reserve pay-to-win judgments till we see the actual shop, the actual thing in action. Remember, we were told that Thunder Liberty wouldn't be pay-to-win either, and they have an RMT shop for their auction house, so yeah, maybe just withhold judgment until we see it. That said, they may have learned a little bit from that, as they refer to the BM or business model of TL as a negative for retention. But that said, we got a lot of reveals of the game itself between the financial disclosures earlier in May and the stream at the end of the month. Aion 2 is aiming to implement more of a PvE focus than the past games and succeed the previous iteration in every way. It takes place 200 years after Aion and is reportedly 36 times larger than the original game and allows for true flight rather than just, gliding about. Flight itself, I'd suggest, has actually advanced quite a bit in MMOs, with Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft making some pretty nifty changes to how it plays to make it feel more tactile and interesting than just pressing your W key forward, so it'll be interesting to see if that has kept up with those changes or if Flight will feel old by the time it gets here. In one of the bigger changes from the first game, Asmodeans and Elios will be playing on separate servers, with PvP coming in two different ways: matchmaking battles and something called invasion events. The latter actually has me the most excited because it's got me picturing these temporary world PvP events in the open world, if that is what they mean. If you could essentially have what would amount to like Rift style like PvP events just opening up in the world, I think that would be an awesome, really interesting thing, especially if you're separated on different servers and those are the times you get to come in and have focused world PvP for something that's like worth doing. I think that could be a huge thing, and I'm surprised that no one's done it before. They also announced all the launch classes that will be included with the game, and it sounds a bit like a holy trinity. Gladiator is the sub-tank that sounds fun as hell, focusing on strong area attacks and lifesteal. Be still my little Shadow Knight and Blood Knight heart. Templar is the more traditional sword and board tank, boring, sorry, it's just how I feel. And then Assassin is probably going to be really annoying for people in PvP, as is the stealthy backstabber DPS. Ranger is probably an even more annoying version of the Assassin, as it is a ranged DPS. Spirit Master is an interesting one. It was just listed as Summon Spirits for solo play by Icy Veins. In the translation from Reddit, it says specializes in solo combat through Summon Spirits. So yeah, a Necromancer from EverQuest, I guess, basically. Sorcerer, no shocker here, is big explosive damage. Cleric, also not exactly shocking, is the big ol' healer of the group. Chanter, the Chanter fits as a hybrid support with healing and buffs. Aion 2 will lean into PvE content with dungeon runs that include solo dungeons, 4-player dungeons, and 8-player dungeons, as well as dynamic field events. Dungeons will have an optional easy mode so new players can learn the dungeon with guides on what's going on. That pretty much wraps up Aion 2 and everything we've learned so far. To recap, you've got action combat, beautiful visuals, possible maybe pay to win, but maybe later in line when people are already into the game and, addicted, kind of nefarious. Asmodeans and Elios are in timeout and they're not allowed to play together except for certain times when they get to come together and punch each other in the face. There'll be a ton of flying in this big ass world, 8 total classes, and there's gonna be a big focus on PvE for multiple playstyles, whether you want to play alone, play with groups, or slightly larger groups. I guess not really raids. And they'll be releasing later this year in Taiwan and South Korea with a global release plan for the middle of 2026. If all of that is too flashy for you, if it makes you yearn for the social-based dungeon-crawling gameplay where you get scared every time you run around a corner because you might die to a train, well, then you might be more interested in our next game, Monsters and Memories, which is aiming for an early access launch also in 2026. Monsters Memories is the classically inspired EverQuest-like MMO that has gone and made me sound like an idiot for complaining about the lack of tests in my latest video, because now they've got a shit ton. There's several of them, so I don't know, get your pen and paper or whatever, I don't know, use your phone and write these down, because you're not going to want to miss these tests to get in and explore the game and die to fire beetles a lot, and then get lost in the dark. They'll be running tests on June 27th to the 29th, July 23rd to the 27th, September 1st to September 7th, and you know, my birthday just happens to be September 8th, and I think we can come together as a community and say, hey, Monsters and Memories, what about just like extending the test just one day to September 8th? Because, you know, I think we could just like as a gift to all of us, so that we can ignore life and get lost in a virtual world, because life is scary. Just for like one more day. One more. Then finally, their last test announced this year is from November 1st through the 10th for their longest test of the year at a full 10 days. There's also the standard warning for within development MMOs that these dates are tentative and subject to changes, so the best place to keep apprised of info on future tests is going to be their Discord. It's also where you can see things like server status and meet the community in the game, so it's worthwhile hopping in there. Monsters and Memories is careening toward their early access date of 2026, and these stress tests will be hugely helpful, so if you have time to devote to the game to help them and stress those servers to ensure smoothness when that early access does come, I'm sure they'd appreciate it. And every time I log into Monsters and Memories, it's just a bit more fun. Whether it's new lighting, better server performance, or new UI elements, it's just great seeing the world evolve. So like I was saying in the outset of this video, just before I launched this video, we got an update from Pantheon Rise of the Fallen that's definitely worth talking about. They just dropped a June roadmap update, something that I hope they do a lot, at least every month, that not only gave us a date for the next big content update, but also let us know what's currently being worked on, whether they're ahead of schedule and where they're behind. First, the highlight of the update is the Ash Breather Trench and Enclave, which will be releasing on June 11th, 2025. This new area is described as 2 new large playable areas in Silent Plains, with both indoor and outdoor areas designed for level 35 to 45. So my level 21 Necromancer will be staying far the hell away from it. But from another recent blog update, we learned a little bit about how the Ash Breather's Trench had come together, and it sounds like it's going to be a cohesive, fanatical subculture with some unique beliefs, so kind of like fans of EverQuest. I'm eager to find out more about who the Ash Breathers are when I'm high enough level to anyway. It will include roughly a dozen named and epic encounters with one main boss, but the main boss is still a work in progress and will be coming later in this update section. There will also be new quests, new perception triggers, and storylines linking perception triggers to some of those same quests, as well as new equipment and items, including distinct epic and rare items. I think in general, more quests, more perception triggers, more items, and more itemization in general is all gonna make people happy. Some of the things they talked about being continued in this little ribbon cycle of the update that is like on the roadmap here, it'll be that final boss from Ash Breathers, more quests and perception triggers in both Ash Breathers and in other existing areas, crafting items specific to Ash Breathers, level 30 crafting and gathering, iconic abilities and their animations, and continued combat mechanics and class abilities up to level 40. For the future roadmap items, they talked about how they've got about 70% of the terrain for Black Rose Keep done at this point, and mounts are actually working, while the taming system is being engineered and Badia de Cara's lore has now finished. So that's several items from the rest of the roadmap for the rest of the year already in progress. There's some good and there's some bad through all of this. The class ability and class specific quests for the second ribbon on the roadmap don't seem to be complete and kind of seem to have taken a bit longer than they may have thought, but Ash Breathers is a little bit ahead of schedule. And the second to last ribbon already has mounts in and working, though I imagine we'll actually be seeing those in game anytime soon. Progress is progress, and people who may be in the higher level ranges will, I'm sure, be happy to see the higher level content coming in.